The moment Ethan Ward stepped into the dimly lit nursery of his penthouse, he expected to see the usual, a quiet room, the gentle hum of the humidifier, the warm glow of the quiet room, nightlight. Instead, what caught his breath was the sight of a woman he didn't know, dressed in a plain nanny's uniform, rocking his infant daughter, Lily, with the kind of steady grace that made the whole room feel softer. Her hands were firm yet gentle, guiding a warm bottle to Lily's lips, her voice a whisper of melody that seemed to slow even Ethan's racing thoughts. "Who are you?" he asked. His tone calm, but edged with the authority of a man used to controlling every detail. She met his gaze without flinching. "Caroline James. Temporary placement from Bright Path Care. I was told you needed someone tonight." Ethan took a step forward, instinct urging him to reclaim his child, but Lily curled closer into Caroline's elbow, sighing contentedly. That small act stopped him cold. Ethan had always equated safety with bulletproof glass, high-end security systems, and a team of lawyers on call. But in that moment, he saw a different kind of safety, one that had nothing to do with steel or codes, and everything to do with trust, presence, and emotional steadiness. Caroline wasn't just holding his daughter, she was holding the kind of calm Ethan realized he couldn't buy, yet desperately needed in his home. When Ethan Ward first met Caroline James, he had no idea the calm confidence in her eyes came from a past steeped in discipline, danger, and a fierce commitment to protecting the vulnerable. Most people who walked into his penthouse arrived with rehearsed politeness and an eagerness to please. Caroline carried none of that. Instead, she carried a presence, a quiet, measured way of moving through the room that suggested she was reading every detail. From the faint hum of the air vents to the angle of the nursery door. It wasn't long before Ethan learned why. Over a cup of tea in the kitchen, after Lily was asleep, Caroline mentioned she had once worn a badge. Years ago, she had served as a police officer in a busy metropolitan precinct. She spoke about it the way others might speak of a former address, not romanticizing it, but never dismissing the weight it carried. "There's a rhythm to a night shift," she said softly. "Who needs holding first? Who needs watching second? And who needs removing from harm's way entirely?" Ethan could see how that rhythm had followed her into his home. Caroline left the force, not because she was burned out or disillusioned, but because something more important arrived, her son, Noah. He was born premature, fragile enough that every breath felt like a victory. Those nights of counting inhalations, monitoring fevers, and learning to read the smallest signs in a child's face had sharpened her instincts into something beyond training. "With Noah, I learned that protection isn't just about standing at the door," she told Ethan. "It's about knowing the moment before something happens, and creating calm before the storm hits." From her first hour in the Ward penthouse, Caroline began setting what she called the house rhythm. She lowered the lights in the nursery to a twilight glow, adjusted the crib so Lily wouldn't startle when laid down, and kept a muslin blanket folded just so across the arm of the rocking chair. She timed her movements with the cadence of Lily's breathing, waiting until the baby's tiny fists loosened before even thinking about transferring her to the crib. Ethan, used to measuring success in quarterly gains and decisive actions, was startled by the patience this required. But the rhythm wasn't just for the child, it was for the entire home. Caroline checked locks without fanfare, tested the baby monitor's angle, so it didn't shine in Lily's eyes, and noted the blind spots in the hallway cameras. She jotted quick notes on a sticky pad: door code, emergency contacts, which stairwell offered the quickest exit. Every action was deliberate, economical, and silent. It reminded Ethan of watching an expert at work, only this time the stakes weren't stock prices, they were heartbeats. That same night, the sound of an unexpected knock broke the quiet. Ethan's instinct was to go to the door, but Caroline's was faster. She moved into position, not aggressively, but in a way that made it clear no one would pass without her say-so. Her voice was calm but edged with authority as she spoke to the two suited men outside, making it clear they would leave without crossing the threshold. When the door closed, she turned back to Ethan and said simply, "Safety isn't just a lock. It's the stance you take when someone tries to walk through it." The words stayed with him. Ethan had invested millions into physical security, reinforced doors, advanced alarm systems, vetted staff, but none of that had ever given him the assurance Caroline's presence did in that moment. It wasn't just her past as a police officer that mattered. It was her ability to apply that experience with precision and without panic. She didn't need to posture or raise her voice. Her authority was in her steadiness. Over the next few days, Ethan noticed how quickly she adapted to any change. When Lily stirred from a nap with a fever, Caroline had a warm compress ready before he even thought to look for the thermometer. When the building's security desk reported an unusual elevator access attempt, she had already restricted entry to the penthouse and logged the incident for follow-up. She layered her actions, protecting Lily physically, shielding the household from intrusion, and keeping Ethan from reacting out of impulse. It became clear that for Caroline, the priority was always the child. She told Ethan once, without a trace of hesitation, "I'm not here for you. I'm here for Lily." Strangely, instead of bruising his ego, the words lifted a weight from him. It was an anchor in a world where every other interaction seemed to come with hidden motives or personal gain. Ethan began to realize that Caroline's house rhythm wasn't just about safety, it was about trust. It was in the unspoken agreements. The way she would signal with 2 fingers when he needed to keep his words short during a tense conversation, or how she'd station herself between Lily's crib and any unexpected visitor. He found himself adjusting his own habits, putting his phone down during feedings, lowering his voice in the nursery, even counting 3 breaths before responding to a stressful email. One evening, as the city lights pulsed against the glass walls of the penthouse, Ethan watched Caroline check the side door, test the baby monitor, and write a new protocol note to post discreetly in the kitchen. It struck him that this wasn't just a job for her, it was an oath. She had traded the badge for a crib, but the mission hadn't changed: protect the ones who can't protect themselves. And for the first time since his wife's passing, Ethan felt that the home wasn't just a place to retreat to, it was a place that could stand. Not because of the locks or the walls, but because someone inside knew how to hold the rhythm when it mattered most. The knock came just after midnight, 3 sharp raps that sliced through the quiet of the penthouse like a warning bell. Ethan Ward was halfway to the door before Caroline James's voice stopped him cold. "Stay here," she said evenly, her gaze already sweeping the hallway. She shifted her stance in a way Ethan had seen once before, back straight, weight low, every muscle alert. It wasn't the posture of a nanny. It was the posture of someone who'd stood in a doorway before, knowing what might be on the other side. Ethan's hand hovered over the smart lock panel, but Caroline was already checking the side camera feed. 2 men stood there, dark suits, expensive, but frayed at the edges, the kind worn by people who wanted to look legitimate, but carried the weight of a different kind of business. One of them leaned forward, chin high, scanning past her toward the interior. The other carried himself with the slow confidence of someone used to intimidation. "I'll handle it," she murmured, stepping into the outer hall. When she cracked the door just enough to speak, the man on the left smiled, a lawyer's smile, smooth and hollow. "Mr. Ward? We need to discuss Mrs. Elena Ward's outstanding obligations. This won't take long." Caroline didn't blink. "You can discuss them with his attorney in the morning." Her voice was steady, low enough not to disturb Lily sleeping in the nursery, but sharp enough to cut through their false politeness. The man on the right tried to lean past her again, eyes counting doors. She moved subtly, planting her hand against the frame, not a shove, but a solid barrier he couldn't pass without making it obvious. 3 seconds to step away from this hallway," she said, her tone dropping into something colder. "And never in front of a child's door." For a moment, the air in the corridor tightened. Ethan, standing just behind the line of sight, felt the heat of confrontation coil in the silence. Then, with a muttered "we'll be back," the men retreated toward the elevator. "Not tonight," Caroline replied to their backs, locking the door with a click that sounded like a closing file. She turned toward Ethan before he could speak. "They're not here for paperwork. They're here to see if this house has someone guarding the door." He felt a chill move up his spine. In the boardroom, leverage meant pressure on a deal. Here, it meant 2 strangers standing within feet of his sleeping daughter. And Caroline was right. If they'd sensed hesitation, they'd be back with sharper teeth. Ethan's instinct was to call them back, to confront them head-on, but Caroline was already guiding him into the living room. "You glance at your phone when the knock came," she said. Quietly, they saw that. Measured that pause. "You can't give them anything to read except resolve." While Ethan wrestled with the adrenaline still coursing through him, Caroline began drafting what looked like a military operation in miniature. A sticky note went up inside the kitchen cabinet. Door code. Open only if visitor says, Lily blooms at 3. Emergency numbers. Protocol for where Ethan should stand if the door must be opened. Restricted elevator access. Camera sweeps every 30 seconds. You've done this before, he said finally. She didn't look up. Yes. The rest of the night was a test in discipline. At 2:13 a.m., Ethan's phone buzzed a legal demand email from a firm he recognized, one connected in a roundabout way to his late wife's investments. The CC line carried a name that twisted the situation into something more dangerous. Charlotte Haynes, chairwoman of his own board. They're trying to make you answer now, when you're tired and off balance, Caroline said. Reading the email once. Draft the response. Schedule it for morning. The night belongs to Lily, not them. Ethan felt the unfamiliar strain of holding back, of not reacting. But as the hours passed, the weight in his chest began to ease. Lily slept without a single startle. The apartment felt still, safe. By dawn, the plan was in motion. The email would go out at 6:55 a.m., routed through his legal counsel. The building's security team had instructions. Access points were locked down. Every detail was logged. Caroline's notes lined the inside of the pantry like a quiet wall. It was only then that Ethan realized what she'd done. She hadn't just turned away 2 men in suits. She had stopped him from making the exact kind of mistake his adversaries were counting on. In the past, he would have answered that midnight knock with force, with heat, with words that could be twisted against him in court or the press. Instead, the only record now was a closed door and a steady rhythm inside the home. Standing in the nursery, watching Lily breathe under the soft glow of the nightlight, Ethan looked at Caroline with something close to awe. If you hadn't been here, you'd have opened the door, she finished for him, not unkindly. And we'd have lost the rhythm. He didn't argue. She was right. From that moment forward, Ethan understood that the real danger wasn't just outside, it was the pressure that could make him misstep. And the most valuable protection he had wasn't a legal team or a security system. It was a woman in a plain uniform who knew exactly how to stand in the right place, at the right time, so the people inside could keep breathing easy. By the time the city outside began to fade from black to charcoal gray, Ethan Ward's penthouse had been transformed from a vulnerable high-rise apartment into a well-guarded fortress, though not in the way he'd always imagined. There were no extra guards stationed at the door, no aggressive barricades. Instead, Caroline James had installed something far more effective. A living, breathing strategy that balanced security with the quiet rhythms of a child's home. It began with a single phrase written in block letters on a yellow sticky note and placed discreetly inside a cabinet door. Lily blooms at 3. That, Caroline explained, would be the only passcode anyone could give to be allowed past the threshold. No code, no entry. No exceptions, not even for familiar faces. From there, she moved with quiet precision, layering protections one by one. She called Diego, the head concierge, instructing him to restrict elevator access to the penthouse floor. Only approved names, hers, Ethan's, their pediatrician, and the nurse would be able to ride up without clearance. Anyone else would be stopped, verified, and logged before even reaching the top level. Next came the cameras. Caroline adjusted their sweep intervals to every 30 seconds and angled them to cover blind spots near the side hallway places where someone could linger out of sight. She synced all camera feeds to her phone, ensuring she could review any movement without waiting for building staff to relay information. Then, from her small canvas bag, she produced something Ethan didn't expect. A vibration sensor, no larger than a postage stamp. This attaches to the door frame, she explained, fitting it neatly in place. If anyone so much as touches the door, it pings my phone immediately. No one gets a silent second chance. Ethan watched as she worked, surprised not just by the tools, but by the seamless way she integrated them into the home without disrupting its warmth. He realized she wasn't trying to build a fortress for herself. She was building one for Lily, and in a way that wouldn't make the child feel like she was growing up inside a bunker. But the real strategy went beyond locks and sensors. Caroline was teaching him how to keep his own composure in the face of what she called pressure plays. When the board chair, Charlotte Haynes, sent another late-night message pressing him to approve a deal with hidden hooks, Caroline didn't tell him what to say, she told him how to say it. 2 sentences, she reminded him, holding up 2 fingers. Short, clear, no room for twisting your words. Anything more, and they'll try to bait you into a longer conversation you can't win on their terms. Her coaching wasn't theoretical. That morning, when Charlotte called demanding a quick signature on the Whitestone deal, Ethan's first instinct was to argue point by point. Instead, he kept to the script. Company decisions go through the independent committee. All family matters go through legal. Then he hung up before the conversation could spiral. Caroline nodded when he told her. Good. You set the rhythm. You don't let them set it for you. Ethan had spent his career equating control with speed, acting fast, closing deals before the speed acting. Other side had time to regroup. Caroline was showing him the opposite. In her world, control meant slowing things down, keeping your balance, forcing the other side to move on your side schedule. It was a lesson he hadn't known he needed until now. She mapped out protocols not just for the physical space but for every point of contact with the outside world. The elevator was now on a timed lock, security patrols passed the hallway every 30 minutes, and the concierge had orders to accept no packages or documents directly. Everything went to legal first. In the kitchen, beside the fridge, she posted a laminated sheet outlining the sequence of actions for any knock event, as she called it. 1. Do not open the door. 2. Verify through camera. 3. Ask for the passcode. 4. Redirect all deliveries to legal counsel. Woo. Log time, description, and any identifying details. She also separated threats into 2 categories: external leverage, like the debt collectors, and opportunistic reporters, and internal leverage like boardroom allies who might suddenly shift under pressure. Both, she warned, required the same defense. Predict their moves, keep the rhythm, never let them see panic. To Ethan's surprise, the strategy extended to his digital life. She had him schedule responses to contentious emails so they never went out at night, ensuring that any reply happened in daylight, when tempers and headlines were easier to control. The night belongs to Lily, she reminded him more than once. Don't give it away to people who want to own it. What impressed him most was how she integrated these measures into daily life without turning the penthouse into a war zone. Lily's bedtime routine stayed the same: soft lighting, quiet humming, a bottle warmed to just the right temperature. While Ethan held his daughter, Caroline would quietly check the vibration sensor's battery or run a camera test, never breaking the calm. That afternoon, when a man in a dark suit lingered too long outside the boardroom during a meeting, Caroline intercepted him with the same steady authority she'd shown at the penthouse door. Room A is in a closed session, she told him, positioning herself to block his line of sight. Later, she logged his appearance in her notes, cross-referencing with security footage. Ethan began to see the genius of her approach. Every piece of the strategy, whether a code, phrase, a camera angle, or a 2-sentence reply, wasn't just a defensive move. It was part of a larger rhythm, one that protected the child first, the home second, and the man at the center last. That night, as the city lights flickered beyond the glass walls, Ethan watched Lily sleeping peacefully. The magnetic chime on the door was silent, the cameras showed nothing but empty hallways, and his phone was face down. No urgent messages, demanding his immediate response. He turned to Caroline. I thought security was about stopping someone from getting in, he admitted. Now I think it's about keeping your balance so they can't knock you over. She smiled faintly. That's the real door you're guarding. And Ethan realized she was right. The locks, the sensors, the codes, they were vital. But the most important thing Caroline had given him was the ability to stand steady under pressure, no matter who was knocking. The air inside Alicia Monroe's law office felt cooler than the spring morning outside cool in a deliberate way, the kind of climate you set when you want the other side to feel a little off balance. Ethan Ward sat at the polished walnut conference table, hands resting loosely in front of him, but every muscle in his shoulders told Caroline James that the tension was there. She was seated just behind him, where she could see the entire room. The door, the glass walls, and the men who would be walking through them any second. Alicia, sharp in a charcoal coat, leaned in before the meeting began. Remember the ground rules. All communication goes through me, no discussion about family, and if they mention Lily, we end the meeting on the spot. Ethan nodded. Caroline gave him their silent signal. 2 fingers tapped at her wrist. 2 sentences. Keep the rhythm. At 9:03, the door opened. Vince and Derek, the debt collectors, entered first, both wearing suits that were more flash than substance, followed by a younger man with thin glasses and a briefcase. Shefford, representing Vance and Morel, he said smoothly, taking a seat without waiting to be offered one. Alicia pressed the record button on a small device in the center of the table. Meeting begins. At 9:04 a.m. Purpose. Establish a legal pathway for claims related to the estate of Mrs. Elena Ward. Participants as listed. Shefford started with a soft pitch. We're here for an open conversation, Mr. Ward. No one wants this spilling into the press. Without a word, Alicia slid an evidence bag onto the table. Inside was the bouquet left at Ethan's penthouse door, the white envelope, and the printed card that read, "Cooperate, and at his house stays quiet." Beside it, photographs of the 4:19 a.m. elevator log showing an attempted access to the penthouse floor, the black SUV's license plate, and the 2:13 a.m. email, with Charlotte Haynes CC. This, Alicia said evenly, was your version of an open conversation last night. From this moment forward, all contact with Mr. Ward goes through legal counsel. No visits to his home, no late-night calls, no items left at the door. Violate this, and we file for a restraining order. Immediately. Vince gave a dry laugh. We were just bringing flowers. Caroline, from her seat behind Ethan, tilted her head slightly, her signal not to take the bait. Ethan kept still. Alicia didn't flinch. You're invoking UC Cicuno on Drexel Crescent, correct? Fine. Keep your claim within the estate of Mrs. Ward. No rights attached to Ward Cloud or any client data. Sheffard's eyes flickered, just enough for Caroline to note it, when Alicia added, and before you say it's coincidence, public filings show Vance and Morrow represented a Whitestone-linked fund in 2019. We have an independent committee reviewing that conflict. Derek leaned forward, hands splayed on the table. We just want payment. No games. Victor Tan, Ward Enterprises General Counsel, slid a packet across. Verified obligations of Elena Ward's estate per the trustee bank. Payment path. Escrow trust with scheduled disbursements. No conditions tied to the company. You'll also sign a pledge. No contact with Mr. Ward's residence, no board outreach, and no threats involving a minor. That part is non-negotiable. The table fell into a tight, tense silence. Shefford scanned the packet, murmured to Vince, and Derek. Vince shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable, but Derek nodded once. Ethan chose that moment to speak, just 2 sentences, as rehearsed. I will settle what's legitimately Elena's. The door opens in the right place, the lawyer's office. Everything else stays shut. His voice was low, steady, and deliberately slow, each word weighed. Behind him, Caroline could see the shift in the room. The collectors weren't dealing with a cornered man anymore. They were dealing with one who had the space and structure to push back. Alicia slid one more document forward. 30-day standstill agreement. During this time, you pursue no contact outside legal channels. If you refuse, we file for an injunction and harassment suit. For 12 seconds, the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioner. Then Shefford reached for the pen, signed, and passed it to Vince and Derek. The 3 signatures landed like small anchors on the page. Good, Alicia said, snapping the folder shut. We reconvene in 7 days, here, not at Child's door. As the collectors left, Caroline rose and moved to the hallway. A man in another dark suit lingered at the far end, pretending to study a wall directory while glancing toward the Fursavant's conference room. She walked toward him, stopping just close enough to make her point. Can I help you? She asked, voice polite but immovable. He muttered something about looking for another office and walked away. Caroline made a mental note of his shoes, his watch, the absence of an access badge, then texted Grace at the front desk. Dark suit, no badge, 27th floor hallway, alert security. Back in the conference room, Alicia packed her files. We've bought you space, she told Ethan. Now we use it to dismantle whatever leverage they think they have. Ethan exhaled for what felt like the first time that morning. The Whitestone data clause? Gone, Alicia said. Committee holds the reins. And Charlotte? She's off the discussion until the conflict review is complete. They left together, stepping into the clear light of late morning. In the elevator, Ethan turned to Caroline. If you hadn't been here, you'd have tried to outtalk them in the first 5 minutes, she finished, a ghost of a smile on her face. And you'd have given them something to twist. He didn't deny it. Instead, He nodded, the corners of his mouth tightening in something that wasn't quite a smile, but was close. We keep the rhythm. Outside, the city still roared with its usual noise, headlines, rumors, agendas. But inside the bubble of their plan, they'd drawn a clear line. The door opens only in the right place, and nowhere else. And for now, that line was holding. By the end of that turbulent week, Ethan Ward realized he was no longer fighting a battle on just one front, he was defending two, and both were holding. At the corporate level, the independent committee had forced Whitestone to remove its invasive data clause and extend their negotiation window. It was a clear concession, one that bought Ethan breathing room to protect the heart of his company, the cloud division he had built from the ground up. Even more satisfying, Charlotte Haynes, the board chair who had been maneuvering behind the scenes, was formally removed from all discussions related to Whitestone and any contact with Vance and Morrell. That single decision closed off a dangerous pipeline between corporate politics and the personal threats that had been creeping toward his front door. At home, the victory felt different, quieter, but no less significant. Since Caroline James had stepped into his life, the penthouse had developed its own rhythm. Secure, steady, predictable, in all the ways that mattered. The Lily Code was in place. Elevator access was restricted to a trusted list. Cameras swept every 30 seconds, and the vibration sensor on the front door fed directly to Caroline's phone. Most importantly, the tension that had once lingered in every corner had lifted. Lily slept through the night, without waking to unfamiliar noises or sudden changes in atmosphere. The threats hadn't vanished entirely. A bouquet left at the door, an anonymous photo taken from a hallway blind spot, and a few persistent visits to the building lobby reminded them that leverage wasn't gone, it was simply testing the perimeter. But each time, Caroline's protocols held. She intercepted attempts before they could escalate, redirected all contact through legal channels, and made sure nothing disrupted the calm inside the nursery. Ethan noticed the change in himself as much as in his surroundings. In the boardroom, he had stopped reacting to bait and started controlling the pace. 2-sentence replies, scheduled emails, and refusing late-night discussions kept his opponents off balance. At home, he mirrored Caroline's patience, counting 3 breaths before responding to Lily's small cries, adjusting her blanket with a steady hand instead of a hurried touch. It struck him one night, standing in the soft glow of the nursery light, that both arenas, corporate and domestic, were running on the same principle. Whether it was a billion-dollar deal or a child's bedtime, the key was to protect the center from unnecessary chaos. Caroline had given him the tools to do that, not by overwhelming the threats with force, but by creating an unshakable rhythm that the other side couldn't disrupt. When news of Whitestone's concession came through, Ethan didn't celebrate with champagne or a triumphant speech. Instead, he quietly forwarded the update to Alicia Monroe, thanked the committee members for their work, and then walked into the nursery to check on Lily. She was asleep, her tiny fists relaxed, her breathing slow and even. The victory in the boardroom mattered, of course it did, but this was the win that grounded him. Caroline found him there and gave a small nod, as if acknowledging both fronts without needing to say it aloud. "House is steady," she murmured. "Company too," he replied. The battles weren't over, and both of them knew it. Whitestone would circle back. Other pressures would rise. But the precedent had been set. The board would follow process. The creditors would follow legal channels, and no one would cross the threshold into their private world without passing the tests Caroline had put in place. For Ethan, the dual victories weren't just about survival. They were about control. Not the paperwas kind he'd once chased, built on speed and domination, but the deeper control that came from holding steady while others tried to shake you. And as long as that rhythm held at the table and at the door, both his company and his daughter would remain exactly where they belonged. Safe. The offer came one evening as the sun dipped low, casting a warm amber glow through the penthouse windows. Ethan Ward sat at the round dining table, a thin folder in front of him. Across from him, Caroline James sipped her tea, the faint hum of the baby monitor filling the quiet between them. "I want you here," Ethan said plainly, sliding the folder toward her. Inside was a formal contract, lead care and household operations manager, along with a salary that reflected her value, full health coverage, and an education stipend for her son, Noah. "You've done more than protect my daughter," he continued. "You've brought order to this home. I don't want that to be temporary." Caroline read the pages with the same care she gave to checking the nursery door at night. There was no rush, no glance at the total figures before the fine print. When she finally looked up, her voice was calm but firm. "If I accept, there are conditions non-negotiable." Ethan nodded for her to continue. "First," she said, "Lily keeps a consistent schedule. No last-minute business calls dragging you past bedtime, no visitors disrupting her rhythm. Second, there's no shouting into phones in front of her. The tone inside this home stays steady, no matter what's happening outside. And third, when the door knocks, we don't lose our stance. Ever. Whether it's a neighbor, the board, or anyone else, this space stays secure." Ethan listened without flinching. He wasn't just agreeing to rules for his daughter, he was agreeing to a different way of living. "Agreed," he said simply, and for once, it didn't feel like a concession. Caroline closed the folder and placed her palm flat on the cover. "Then I'll stay." Her tone was the same as when she called building security, calm, decisive, certain. The weight in Ethan's chest eased. Since Caroline's arrival, the penthouse had shifted from a place of constant alertness to a place where Lily could grow without absorbing the stress around her. Formalizing her role wasn't just about having a skilled caretaker. It was about building a foundation he could trust. That night, the changes were already visible. Ethan finished a call with the committee 15 minutes before Lily's bedtime and joined Caroline in the nursery, where they moved quietly through the routine soft light, warm bottle, lullaby just above a whisper. When Lily's breathing deepened, Caroline nodded once, a small, unspoken acknowledgement that the rhythm was intact. Later, as they passed each other in the hallway, Ethan realized the contract wasn't the real commitment they'd made. The real commitment was mutual. To keep this home calm and guarded, to raise Lily in an environment where safety wasn't just locks and alarms, but steadiness, respect, and presence. It wasn't the way Ethan used to measure success, but as he looked at the signed agreement on the table, he knew it might be the most important deal of his life. In the quiet after so many storms, Ethan Ward finally understood what Caroline James had been building since the night she first walked into his home. Safety wasn't the reinforced locks on his penthouse doors, the round-the-clock legal counsel, or the security team on speed dial. It was the steady rhythm that made his daughter Lily sleep without stirring at midnight. It was the calm voice that never wavered, even when strangers stood on the other side of the door. And most of all, it was the presence of someone who knew exactly where to stand and when to shield what mattered most. For Ethan, that shift was profound. He no longer measured protection in steel or signatures, but in the quiet confidence of a home that could hold steady against any pressure. Caroline hadn't just defended his child. She had taught him that true safety is built in the moments no one else sees, the ones where you choose steadiness over panic, and presence over reaction. In our lives, we often chase the biggest locks, the strongest walls, the loudest defenses, thinking they'll keep us safe. But real safety comes from the people who stand in the right place at the right time, holding their ground for what and who they love. When you find someone like that, value them more than anything. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had someone stand guard for you when it mattered most? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the 5 notification bell so you never miss the next story that could change the way you see the world.